This video is going to be a comprehensive walkthrough of every single step from start to finish if you are looking to start an Airbnb business. I wanted to do an updated video to A, incorporate everything that I've learned hosting for the past few years, and B, kind of just condense my bajillion videos on the topic to make something that is concise but yet complete and still action-packed and hopefully easier to follow. The first big step is asking the question, should you even Airbnb? Is what you're getting out of this investment going to be worth what you're putting in? Especially right now, housing is expensive, interest rates are still high, and the demand for travel is changing with this uncertain economy. On one side of the equation, you want to figure out what you are putting in. This is in terms of time. Obviously, it takes time to learn how to do this and the time to set it up, the time to communicate and maintain ongoing operations. And hopefully, as you go through this video, you'll get a better sense on how to estimate how much time this will take. There's the capital in terms of buying property, or even if you already have property, it still takes money to furnish the place, set up some of the basic LLC components, that type of thing. And also there's the opportunity cost to consider. And then the third input is risk. If you're using leverage with a mortgage to purchase a house, there is risk there. Just having your name out there and hosting people, there's a liability component to it. So this whole thing has risk. On the other end of the equation, what are you potentially getting out of it? Ideally, you're getting money in terms of cash flow, and that is something you can figure out as you're doing the math of how profitable a certain listing can be. Make sure you're studying your market in detail before you invest to estimate roughly how much revenue you can expect from a certain property. Another benefit might be more from a tax advantages angle. If you are a high-income earner and you're interested in using the short-term rental loophole, it may be something to consider if you're wanting something that offsets your W-2 income. Study that part in detail to make sure you even qualify and understand that this comes with a lot of operational bookkeeping and documentation. And then lastly, from an investment angle, are you looking to invest in a second home that you get to enjoy but also appreciates in value and have the cost be kind of covered? Or maybe you're just looking to diversify your portfolio and maybe you are currently very concentrated in equities and stocks and you are looking to add real estate. That is an excellent thought. And if that is your route, understand how this additional property fits into your entire bigger picture of all of your investments. If you add this property, how does it affect you in monthly cash flow? How does it affect you down the road in terms of the bigger picture for all of your other goals like retirement and getting financial freedom, all of those things? Run some numbers. I like to use internal rate of return or IRR, and I have a video explaining how that works. Or if you don't want to be doing a lot of math in the spreadsheets, you can also use a tool like Projection Lab. Their non-premium version with pretty much most of the features is free. I know that was a lot and I'm not trying to get you stuck in analysis paralysis, but this is not a small investment. Do the math first. Don't FOMO into this. Still give yourself a deadline, maybe a month to learn about the business and then another month to analyze a market. And by that point, either take action or stop. But if you can approach this with an objective, non-emotional lens, you'll be better off in the long term. One last caveat on the topic of whether you should be Airbnb-ing, and this is something that I've learned since my initial videos. When I'm talking about short-term rentals, it's very much from my perspective. As an almost full-time healthcare professional with a steady income and healthy finances, just looking for ways to diversify into real estate, with bonus points given for the tax advantages. It's a lot less about cash flow and using this to quit my job. And not everyone watching my videos have the same mindset, and that is awesome. But if you're not financially super well versed, like you don't know your annual income, your fixed expenses, what percentages those are, you don't have an emergency fund, if you're looking for ways to get rich quick or to get into the game with no money down. By the way, can I rant about the phrase getting into the game? It's not a freaking game. Investing and business are serious endeavors, and the whole gamification of this kind of implies winning or losing in a very short time frame. It downplays the learning curve. It also downplays the very real operational, legal, and financial complexities. Anyway, if that is you, there are maybe some foundational habits you want to work on first. Build a buffer before you take on this risk and build good foundational disciplined habits before you take on a project that requires ongoing discipline and input like Airbnb. All right, step 2 is getting a property. Some of you watching may already have a long-term rental that you're considering switching to a short-term, or you may be moving house and you're wondering if you should put up your old house as a short-term rental instead of selling it. If that's you, just skip to the next step. If you're starting from scratch and identifying the property that could work as an Airbnb, first you need to pick a market. You do so by A, checking if it's even legal to have Airbnbs in that market, B, have an understanding of the kind of travelers that like to go to that place. Are they like couples, so you need a smaller house, or are they like big old families going on a beach trip? This is the part where drawing from personal experience can be really helpful. C is identifying the market data. So using dashboards like AirDNA, you can get some basic information on the revenue, the average daily rate, and the occupancy based on that market. In my opinion, at this stage, it's totally reasonable just to use the free version of AirDNA because you're just gathering very basic info. Once you get more serious and you need more granular data, like exactly which listing makes how much money and how occupied are they, and kind of you're trying to correlate based on the photos and quality of listing, this is how much they can make. Once you get to that step, then you might need a subscription for that data. After you have a general concept of how much an Airbnb could make in that specific market, part D is to look at the housing market of that area. This is really the last piece of the equation, and it helps you understand, all right, in this specific market, a $1 million house only makes, $30,000 on Airbnb. In this example, obviously that doesn't work. And that's when you would abandon this market, move on to pick another market and study. I've done extremely detailed deep dives on how to pick a market and how to project revenue within a specific market, and I will link both of those videos below. As you're running the numbers, you can feel free to download my free calculator, and I'll link that below as well. You just plug in the price of the house, any loan terms if you're using a mortgage. You would also need to input the expected average daily rate and occupancy and the cleaning fees, and plug in whatever expenses you can estimate. A lot of this you can find on like the property records website as far as like the taxes. Just do your best at this point to give a good estimate, and the calculator will help you get a better sense of what the cash flow might look like and the cash on cash return on an annual basis. This step of picking market and then finding a property can easily take a few months depending on whether there are available listings on the market. Be patient, keep running numbers. Within a couple weeks of practicing that, you should get pretty good at just eyeballing a property and saying, oh yeah, this house is listed for $500 but really should be costing $450. And on Airbnb, I think it should make, $60,000. After you've identified a potential property, then you would put in an offer. That part is very similar to regular home buying processes. There's usually a realtor involved, there's inspections and appraisals and all the things, mortgage companies. You would shop around for home insurance, make sure you're getting multiple quotes, and then you would get to closing on the property. After that, or during, depending on your risk tolerance, you can move on to step 3, which is setting up the business. I know a lot of people would want to get to the decorating and the furnishing and writing of the Airbnb listing, but setting up the admin back end of this properly is super important as a first step. First of all, you'll need to decide on the business structure. Are you going to be an LLC or not? I am not a lawyer and I can't give you advice on this, so make sure you're talking to an actual qualified professional. Just from how I'm thinking of this, an LLC offers another layer of legal protection and separates you as a person to this business. And it is relatively easy to do and isn't that costly. And the annual filings and fees I don't consider to be a major barrier that stops me from doing an LLC. Regardless of whether you choose to set up an LLC or not, you can get an EIN or an employer identification number. This will be very helpful as you're setting up business banking and all the other things. The last thing I want to mention about LLCs is that this is purely a legal/liability type of decision. It does not affect how you are taxed in the US. If you want more tips on the business structure, whether you use an LLC or not, and how to structure it, what if you're in a partnership, all of those things, I recently had a discussion with a CPA on this very topic, and I'll link that below. Next, with your new business entity and EIN in hand, you can now apply for a business banking account. I always recommend keeping your business finances separate. It's just so much easier for bookkeeping, and it's also better from a tax/auditing perspective. I personally have been using Baselane for a little while now, and I really like their interface. It's very easy to use. I like that you can set up different virtual accounts, so you can have a short-term rental occupancy taxes bucket to put aside, or a pool renovation fund that is set up as a business savings account, or I also suggest just a rainy day fund to cover for a slow month where you're not getting as many bookings, and to be prepared for anything something that suddenly breaks and needs to be fixed emergently. This is so helpful for keeping your finances super organized, and you can even earn some interest on those savings accounts. If you sign up using my link below, you also get a $100 bonus after you make an eligible deposit. And who doesn't like free money? I want to thank Baselane for sponsoring this video, and go check them out at baselane.com/Lydia. The next step is to consider setting up business credit cards. This is a tool that can be so useful for all the points, for the 0% APR, for that initial furniture setup that can be crazy amount of money. But credit cards can also be a double-edged sword if you're not using them correctly. Before you sign up, make sure you can commit to paying everything every month in full, on time. And even if you're using that 0% APR thing for 12 months for that initial setup cost, which is what I did, remember you still need to pay those minimums every month and set like multiple reminders of when those 12 months are due. Make sure you actually already have the cash reserves to pay it off anytime you want. I had that entire balance just sitting in a savings account ready to pay on that day. I'm just letting it sit around to earn me some interest. That would be the only responsible way to do this. Yeah, it's nice to get points, but none of those points are worth it if you're paying any amount of credit card interest. I'll leave my personal recommendations below, and I appreciate anyone who uses those links because it does give me some extra bonus points. But ultimately, I think the decision depends on which credit card banking ecosystem you want to stay within, which points you value more than others. That is a whole separate topic. As part of your business setup, you may also need to get a rental license depending on your municipality and arrange for a rental inspection. Sometimes you need to be on site with them. Sometimes these things don't schedule for months and months out. This is especially pertinent for those of you who are looking to manage a property remotely. You're going to want to time everything correctly to coincide with your trip to set up the property. At this early stage of setting up your business, it's also the best time to get started on all of your documentation. I know it's super boring, but you have to do it if you're looking to take advantage of any of those tax benefits. This includes bookkeeping, and you can use Baselane for this. They automatically import all of your transactions, like Airbnb paying you paying the mortgage. All of those things are imported, and you just need to go through and categorize items and make sure you're attaching any receipts. This also includes a time log if you're looking to use the short-term rental loophole and need to prove material participation. I started using Toggle for this based on that discussion I had with our CPA friend Brandon. And it's actually game-changing. Every time I'm texting my cleaner or like responding to a message on my phone anyway, I just open the Toggle app first and let it track the time. It's just so much easier to build this as a habit. It's now automatic, it's more accurate, it's more believable in case of an audit. Tracking also includes mileage. If you are driving to your property back and forth, if you're driving to like Home Depot to pick up a thing to I don't know, or if you're driving to the airport to fly to your property, mileage can be deductible, and you need a system for tracking that as well. Now that we have all the admin background stuff out of the way, let's talk about setting up the property itself. If your property is out of town, you will need to plan for a trip to go there and make sure you're documenting all of that as part of your travel expenses. You'll need to set up utilities. So things like gas, electric, water, sewer. You got to figure out the local service providers and connect service with them. You'll need to set up internet service and make sure once it's all set up, you test the Wi-Fi at different spots in your house, especially if you have a big old house, and also try to speed test when many devices are connected to it to make sure this won't be an issue for guests. Another very important initial setup category is all the security stuff. So you want to change all of your door locks and as much as possible use keypad ones instead of key ones because it's so much easier to coordinate giving a new key code to guests versus like trying to hand over a lockbox with keys. And we did that for the tiny house actually because it is a special lock that cannot be changed into a door code. So it can be done, but not as ideal for especially remote managing. Nowadays, we have a Yale door lock and we just use our Yale app here on my phone to just change the door code, have it be guest specific and time specific. Our cleaner has a code, our assistant has a code, we have a code. And this also actually serves as an additional way of time tracking for material participation. If you need it to prove that you are working more than anyone else, then you need some proof of who anyone else is. And so cleaners having a code provides a method of tracking their time. On the topic of security, you might also want to consider the noise monitors. We use the Minute monitor, and it just hangs out on the ceiling with capabilities of noise detection and smoke detection. For us, it serves as a deterrent, B, just kind of a peace of mind that is there, and C, in case of a dispute, which fortunately has never happened, we can at least show it on our phone like, hey, it says you're at like 100 decibels. Like, we have proof of this. Hopefully that's not something I'll ever have to say, but knowing it's there is also peace of mind. You may also want external cameras to monitor who all is coming in and out of your property. This helps you make sure people are not having a party or like going way over capacity. It also gives you peace of mind in terms of like not having randos show up to your property. You're not getting burgled. And then honestly, on a more practical note, we use this to see if the guests have left early, and our cleaners can start cleaning earlier for a like same day turnover. Or it is helpful to make sure our garbage bins are collected, because this is our neighbor's biggest pet peeve and we want to be respectful of that. It's been helpful for keeping an eye on even the landscaping that, oh, looks like the tree's like poking too far down into the garage. Best case scenario is your handy people and your cleaners, whoever is going to your house, they are keeping you in the loop. But in case they miss something, you get to be the second set of eyes through these cameras. Next, we are finally getting to the fun stuff with interior design. I really like this part, and I like saving different ideas on an app like House. I love shopping for furniture and decorating, and I've done 2 whole videos on how to furnish a place if you want more details. The biggest thing with interior design and furnishing is just understanding your guest demographic and matching expectations to reality. If your target demographic is a bunch of women going on a bachelorette trip, yeah, that has a very different aesthetic to a property that is more aimed at more established professionals who now have families and they're doing a big family trip and they want something a little bit more luxury and refined and not flashy. And that in turn also have a completely different vibe and set of requirements for something that is for maybe commuters, like a room in a house for someone who is looking for a budget-friendly option just to stay the night in the middle of transiting somewhere else. So there is no blanket interior design rule of like maxing out, picking the nicest furniture and having the nicest pictures. It's understanding your target market, who you're going for, and communicating directly to them. I know you're also wondering about specific ROI on specific items. I'd say a good bed is important. And then making sure some other high use objects like the couch or TV, or those are in good condition. And then another tip, if you're going for like a more higher end type of vibe, you don't have to do everything super expensive. Sprinkle in a few higher end nice items. Make sure the more generic items are not like cheap and incorrect. Like if I were running a nice luxury beach house, it would be ridiculous to have like the cheapest toilet paper that is super flimsy, right? It's like making sure you're not making a mistake that breaks immersion from this luxury experience. I highly recommend hiring help if that is within your budget, because there's just a lot of assembly of furniture, a lot of breaking down boxes. None of these tasks are that difficult. Like, how hard is it to unbox a vase and plop it somewhere? But it's still just a lot of work, and having an extra set of hands really cuts down on that setup time and lets you focus on other parts of setting up your Airbnb that these other handyman that you're hiring, they can't do that part. After you complete your furniture setup, then you go on to stocking supplies. I'm talking about shampoo, conditioner, body wash, dish soap, all of the paper products, extra towels, extra bed linens, laundry detergent, light bulbs, batteries. We didn't do this in the beginning, but I highly recommend some sort of an inventory system so that you know, for example, which light bulb goes to which light fixture, or which battery is used for the fan remote, for the TV remote, and whether you already have this in stock. I know it's tedious to be tracking this stuff, and I don't mean like track exactly how many toilet paper rolls are in there down to the like exact number, but having a good baseline and then starting to recognize patterns of how often you need to repurchase something, it helps cut down the number of deliveries and number of trips that your cleaner or whoever has to go and unbox stuff and put away in your closet. The other way it helps is if a certain bulb is out in the house and it just needs someone to replace a bulb, which is the simplest task. If you know you already have this in your inventory, you can just tag it onto some other task that your handyman is coming to do anyway. The final and most important step of setting up your property, gathering your team. Your team includes cleaners, handyman, landscape people, pest people, a pool service person if you have a pool, maybe an assistant. We personally have a local assistant that is kind of just on call for us. We don't use him very much, but he's just a reliable person that we have in the area that could come at a moment's notice. With each of these team positions, you want to make sure you're talking to at least a few options within each category to understand what is available out there in terms of cost, quality, what services they provide. For example, cleaning, it sounds obvious. Yeah, you come clean the house and flip it for the next guest. But there are things that you need to make sure you're communicating, like how are deep cleans handled? Are you adding a bonus task into each flip? And over time, you expect the house to stay at a deep cleaned level? Or is deep cleaning a thing that you schedule once a year, once every other month? Like, how often do you do this? Is there a charge for that? Will the cleaners be charging extra for linens? Do they handle the garbage? How about if the flip is on a different day as when the garbage is taken out or brought back in? Like, do they come back and roll the bins back into the garage? Or what role do they take in the restocking of stuff? Do they tell you when something is low, or are you supposed to figure out something is running out in some other way? A lot of this seems like very small nitty-gritty tasks, but you do need to figure out, especially if you're managing remotely, but in general, it's good to figure out who is doing what so that you have a system, a standard operating procedure to handle these very basic and recurring functions in your business. I know it's been a lot of steps, and I have a completely free downloadable PDF where you can follow along all the steps and kind of serve as a checklist as you're going through your own property setup. Or if you want a more comprehensive dashboard that walks you through the whole thing completely step by step and what to do in each step and integrates into your calendar, sort of as an automated to-do list and a project management system, I have systemized the entire setup process plus the ongoing operations, plus all my guest messaging templates and my business trip/tax documentation templates into my vacation venture vault. It is the closest thing to me sitting next to you and kind of going through each step and making sure you have all your bases covered. And I wish I had this when I first started, because let me tell you, I have definitely missed a whole bunch of things that ended up costing me money for guest refunds and emergency gas tank refills because I didn't set up the gas tank correctly. My initial business trips were more stressful and disorganized and not as fun as they could have been. Anyway, if that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave the link below. All right, moving on. Now that you have set up your property itself, it is time to work on the platform setup. The first thing is to get good photos. It doesn't make sense to spend this much money on the property, both in acquiring it and the setting up, only to skimp on like a few $100s of photos. My recommendation is to get a professional photographer, ideally someone that has experience doing short-term rental photos and understand the very slight difference between that versus like your basic Zillow photos that are as zoomed out as possible from as wide of an angle as possible. I will give a couple exceptions for using just iPhone photos. One is if you're renting a room in your house and it's not expected to make that much money and you're not investing that much into the photography, that's fine if it matches your target demographic. Just make sure you are at like normal person height eye levels. Make sure your phone is actually level. There is a grid you can turn on iPhones that helps guide you to angle your phone correctly. Definitely turn off HDR for all you iPhone users. It hurts my eyeballs. Do not do that. And then finally, before you get ready to upload, do some minor edits. Maybe the white balance is a bit off. You can change the contrast a little bit. Maybe a room is a little too dark. You can tune that up just by a little bit, but not too much because you risk getting into uncanny valley. The other reason to use iPhone photos is to just get going before your official photographer appointment. I think that's fine as a temporary measure. As an alternative, I heard about this AI-assisted photo editing company that is specifically targeting short-term rental owners who are using iPhone photos. I already forgot the name. They actually reached out to me. And it sounds like their service is mainly helping you AI edit your iPhone photos to make them more short-term rental suitable. I haven't tested it. I have mixed feelings about, is it inaccurate? Am I catfishing people? So I don't think I would do that. I would just take an actual photo of good quality. It's honestly not that expensive, but I thought that was interesting and some of you might find it useful. Next step, you need to set up your Airbnb host profile. So like a picture, a description, whatever else details you want to include about yourself. I have been asked this question a few times, whether you use your own person as your name and your photo versus like a professional management company kind of photo and name. That comes down to personal preference. I like using my name because it makes me more of a person when guests message me. And I think the dynamic is more host versus guest. When you're speaking with a management company, sometimes it feels a little more stiff. And so the expectation from the guest might be this is more a hotel, which can be a good or bad thing, depending on the route you want to go. I personally just like to stay on the warm, personable, friendly side. I also think the type of guest who would go for a person as a host versus the type of guest who would go for a management company as a host, those are two different people, and I like that former group more. After your host profile, obviously you're working on setting up your Airbnb listing. This part is tricky because a lot of the paragraph writing stuff for your listing is locked behind the photo step. So if you don't have your photos yet, you might kind of be stuck there. On my free downloadable PDF thing, I do have all the subsections listed out, like the brief description and then a more detailed description and more to know about the neighborhood. There's like a few subsections that you can write out text for. So if you like to work ahead, feel free to grab that download and just use that as a guide. As you're working through your listing, it's also a good time to start understanding how the Airbnb algorithm works. I have a whole video on a deep dive on this, but very briefly, Airbnb, the company, is in the business of making money when people actually make a booking. So it has an incentive to show potential guests listings that they would like. And so they are more likely to promote listings that are successful, have good reviews. People tend to click on them and view the pictures for longer, and listings that eventually have a good conversion rate, meaning the people who end up looking at that page end up booking more likely than not compared to other listings. Definitely go take a look at that video for more details and understanding the metrics and some actionable items on how you can improve your listing within the algorithm. You also need to set up a house manual. Honestly, a simple Google Doc is fine. It just needs to have all the information and have it be easy to read. If you want to be fancy, you can also go to Canva and utilize some of the templates and build your own from there. After that, work on setting up dynamic pricing. Obviously, your listing should not cost the exact same on every single day. Maybe it's more expensive around the holidays or taking into account local events that are happening, as well as local demand and supply. Like, yeah, it's 4th of July weekend, but literally 90% of the listings are still available. That doesn't really have the same effect as maybe an upcoming busy weekend with a conference in town and only say 15% of the listings remain. AirDNA and Price Labs both offer this service, and I've used both before, and honestly, both are fantastic. I think this part is worth the money because A, you don't have to manually go and do this, and B, like, you won't be as good at predicting how much you can charge and observing local patterns and booking rates and all of those things as a computer would be. You also want to set up your cleaning fees and cancellation policies. As far as how much to charge, I would take a look at your neighboring listings of similar size and see how much they're charging, just to make sure you're not completely outrageous. For our beach house listing, we just cover the cost of the actual cleaning itself, and we don't pocket any of that upcharge. If you're in a situation where your neighboring listings are charging way lower cleaning fees and it won't even cover your cost of cleaning, then you'll have to look at adjusting your average daily rate and kind of factoring that in as you're building your dynamic pricing base price. Similarly, for cancellation policies, I would take a look at your market and see what the norm is. Like, if everyone has just moderate cancellation policy and you have strict, you are most likely going to be demoted by the algorithm and you're less likely to get booked. After that would be to look at your messaging setup. If you have the one property and if you're completely new, I don't suggest automating your responses right from the get-go because you don't really know the cadence of when are people messaging you, what are they usually messaging you about in this specific market, how you tend to like to respond. So usually in the beginning, I didn't do this. I automated from the beginning, but I wish I would have just tested out different responses first and then went from there to build the automation. I have a whole bunch of videos on messaging tips and how to get good reviews, and I will make sure to link those below. Now, so far I've mainly talked about setting up on Airbnb, and I do that mainly because Airbnb is the bigger platform and most of my bookings come from Airbnb. But it is a good idea to also publish on VRBO, on booking.com, on a direct booking website, all the things. In my opinion, the initial learning curve is steep as it is. It is totally reasonable to just start with Airbnb and then build from there. I didn't follow my own advice. I started with both Airbnb and VRBO for both of my listings. The VRBO interface feels very much like Windows if you're used to using Mac. It works, it just looks weird sometimes. And so it's a separate learning curve. Once you have more than one platform, you want to make sure those platforms are synced so that you don't get double booked. There are also operational efficiencies you can gain by using the same messaging templates for both platforms so that you're not communicating using two different inboxes and two different sets of messaging templates. And if you edit one, you have to make sure you're editing the other, stuff like that. At that stage, I would suggest looking into a property management software or PMS. I personally use Logify and I've been pretty happy with them. I have also used Hospitable in the past. They can be kind of pricey, but they do have some nice features as well. Whether or not you need a PMS is kind of a personalized decision. You do save time on the messaging templates and syncing the calendars. It is also incredible in helping you set up your whole VRBO profile just from copying from your Airbnb, and it copies also to a direct booking website, which is something that I would never have built just on my own. A bookable calendar on an easy website with images and descriptions that just pulls from my original Airbnb thing. That plus copying over to Google Vacation Rentals, those are the reasons why I pay for the PMS. Definitely not something you need immediately right away, but something to consider as you're growing and using more platforms and want to gain some of that operational efficiency. Moving on to step number 6 is the operation setup. You want to make sure you're testing your space as a guest. It helps you figure out, wow, like the light from this bed is not accessible. There's nowhere to plug in my phone as I am a guest laying in bed and ready to go to sleep. Or in this particular shower, there is nowhere to put a towel or my clothes. Like I don't know where to hang the thing. It's just a very thoughtful extra touch if you can refine some of these small things. You also want to say hi to your neighbors. Just introduce yourself, explain that you're a short-term rental. It's not a legal requirement. It's not like you have to, like no one's making you do this. It's just nice to have them be on your side so that if there are party people, they will tell you. Or if the grass in your front lawn is looking sketchy, they will also let you know. You'd rather hear about these things, ideally, hopefully in a friendly tone because you have a good relationship with them, rather than as a complaint towards your business, like filed outside of you, or in an altercation between the neighbors and your guests. The best way to prevent that is to get to know the neighbors and be on their good side. Also, you just want to do this because you're a good person. Another thing to consider that I didn't have in my initial videos, maybe privacy software for yourself. If you have your name listed as a host on Airbnb and VRBO, it's just so easy for people to Google who you are, and you may not want that. And for me, I also have this YouTube channel, so that's like additional risk of just people knowing too much about me. So I've started paying for a subscription with Aura. They're not like sponsoring this video, and they just help to scan for your info that are available on data broker websites and go through that tedious, boring process of submitting for data removal. The annoying thing with data websites is you don't just submit it once. They come back to that website somehow. So it's like a continuous process of monitoring and submitting for removal, just an extra layer of privacy protection. Another thing you might want to consider is umbrella insurance. So your home insurance or short-term rental insurance protects the house that you're renting out, but umbrella insurance would protect you and the liability on your person. Usually this is like low 3 digits per year, and definitely a peace of mind as you enter into this world with potential liabilities. The last thing I recommend for the operation setup phase is to develop and subsequently refine your standard operating procedures. You're a business. There has to be a method to the madness. Like, whose job is it to restock the house for the paper products? Is it you? Is it the cleaner? How do you want that communication to happen? Or how do you plan to remember to make those monthly local tourist tax filings? How about annual LLC filings and annual license renewals for your rental, or the applying of mulch to your outside garden beds? Is this automatically done by your landscape person every spring without you prompting and they just bill you? Or is this something that you have to separately talk to someone to make sure it gets done? How do you build in periodic assessment of your short-term rental market to make sure you're on top of market trends and still staying competitive from a pricing angle? Whose job is it to replace the furnace filters? How often are you doing it? Who's checking the drains to make sure they're draining well? Is it something you assign when the problem happens, or is something that happens in the background automatically and the responsibility is owned by your handyman? Try your best to standardize these things. These are honestly my least favorite tasks, and I am not the most organized person by default. What you're observing is a forced function, and that's kind of why I built that dashboard, so that I can offload these really mundane, boring tasks out of my brain into some automatic thing that will help me remember. I don't like thinking about these things. I hate trying and failing to remember miscellaneous tasks and then have to pay the consequences of missing that tourist tax payment and having to pay a penalty. You don't have to use my dashboard. Just find a way so that these things are automatically tracked. I nowadays just get notifications when it's time to change that water filter for the house, and got the notification, I'll just text it to the handyman, done. If you're thinking about building your own dashboard from scratch, I do have my previous videos on what the thought process that went into how to build that dashboard. That will always be free. I think that's a solid place to get a framework and get some inspiration so that you can build your own. Alternatively, if you're like, no, thank you, I don't want to build my own thing, I just want a plug and play version that is ready to go, that's also an excellent option. I'll make sure to link both of those things below. All right, step number 7. Before I let you go, I want to give you a sense of the amount of ongoing work that might be needed to maintain your place, maintain the property itself, and also maintain your business. I feel like sometimes the general picture painted by the short-term rental gurus are a little bit rosy. Like, yeah, some weeks I really don't think about this. Everything's on autopilot and I'm not sending messages. I'm not talking to my cleaner. I'm doing nothing, literally nothing. But many weeks of the year, that's just simply not true. And so I want to give you my perspective on the ongoing time commitment and effort that you might have to put in if you're similar to me, semi-beginner-ish managing 1 or 2 properties. First of all, with each guest, there is some level of messaging back and forth. Yes, you'll have automated messages, you'll have templates, but they may have other questions. Maybe they can't find the coffee maker, or they have a question about how the ceiling fans work. Whatever it is, there is usually some other question that you have to deal with. Sometimes your cleaners may also report an issue after the guest checks out, and so with that comes troubleshooting that actual issue, whether it's a thing that got broken or a mess that is messier than a regular mess. And then there's also the piece of communicating that to the guest, or choosing to decide whether you communicate that with the guest or not, getting reimbursement or not. That also takes time. Every month, or at least every other month, you should be doing some sort of a market review to see what the market trends are like, what other properties that are similar to you are making, how occupied they are, and how you compare to their metrics. This takes me on average maybe half hour to an hour, depending on how many new listings there are and how crunched for time I am. You want to stay on top of that to make any adjustments necessary for your own listing. Also, at least once a month, you should set aside time to go through some of your record keeping type stuff. Yes, the transactions are automatically imported, but you still have to categorize them. You might want to attach receipts. There might be missing transactions because you used a different credit card or it was paid in cash and that didn't import. As you do this kind of bookkeeping, accounting-ish type stuff, it's also nice to end your month with kind of a profit and loss statement. It doesn't have to be like super professionally done, but at least have some sense of where your business is heading. After all, it is a business. This type of stuff, if you do it once a month, can easily take a couple of hours to catch up. Or if you're like me, try to do as much as you can on the go, like uploading receipts, time log, all of those things are just as I'm going along, because it gets overwhelming at the end of the month. Once or twice a year, you'll also want to budget time to go visit your property, see how things are going, maybe enjoy it for yourself as a guest to gather some data and think of ways to improve. Obviously, apart from the trip itself, there is the planning that goes in before you head out. So you may be contacting vendors that you want to meet at your location ahead of time, or you may be spending extra time doing documentation to get all of those business meals and and business travel expenses documented into your bookkeeping system. Honestly, the first 6 to 12 months is going to be a little bit more time intensive because it is a steep learning curve. You're going to encounter new problems and be troubleshooting your way through them, and at the same time trying to standardize that and operationalize your business for the future. My advice here during this time frame is to, first of all, try to systemize as much as you can. Once you solve a thing, try to systemize and document so that the next time the same thing happens, you're not starting from scratch. Whether you use my dashboard, your own dashboard, just get into the habit of documenting this problem solving for your future self. Think about how you can prevent this issue from happening in the future, and or if it does happen in the future, how do you speed up that resolution? This is how you build smoother operations that eventually fits your business like a glove. Secondly, stay open-minded and make use of guest feedback. Sometimes people will let you know if they found the coffee maker difficult to use. Maybe a French press is nice, but it doesn't feed all 12 people. Valid. Or they will have some questions about the TV, and the same questions seem to prop up over and over again. Being sensitive to these small pieces of feedback can help you stay ahead of these problems. And it also allows you to build extra information into your FAQs in the house manual, or even to include something into the check-in message to prevent that future problem from happening again. My third piece of advice here is to find a sounding board. I'm very lucky to have an awesome business partner that I also happen to live with, and he's so helpful in proofreading some of my messages to guests to walk that fine line between too spicy versus completely ineffective. He provides a different perspective on how to solve some problems, and also he just takes over some parts of the operations that are more suited to his strengths. For you, this could be a friend or a fellow host. There are also Reddit forums, Facebook groups. Personally, I don't use those too much because I find them to be a little bit on the dramatic side. But sometimes the exact question you're asking has been asked before, and it's nice to hear what other people have thought of that problem. One last comment about the time commitment that I didn't get a sense of when I was initially learning Airbnb stuff. It's not necessarily the quantity of hours. Like most weeks, even if there's an issue, it's an issue that is solved within like 30 minutes. It's more so the unpredictability and poor timing of when these things might happen. So far, knock on wood, nothing in the middle of the night, thank goodness. But sometimes we might get messages or issues when we're hanging out with our kids and we don't necessarily want to take time away from that. Or it might be when we're traveling. Like a few times it has happened where we're on a long drive, my husband is driving and he's listening to his podcast, so he's not looking at the messages. I'm in the backseat taking a nap, so I'm also not looking at the messages. So there's a bit of a delay. My point is you can't really control when these things happen, so that's just something to keep in mind. I hope this video was helpful and a relatively complete starting point for anyone who is looking to start their Airbnb. If you have any questions about short-term rentals, feel free to leave them below. Thank you again to Baseline for their ongoing support to this channel, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye!